All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's digital dialogue. I am so excited to have two very special guests joining me here today. Very familiar faces to anyone that's in our industry. So we've really got the cream of the crop joining us for today's conversation. First, I want to go ahead and introduce Leighton. Leighton is the CEO of Knowhow. Knowhow, I think, has really taken such a huge spotlight in the industry. Rightfully so in the last few years. I know you guys have, we've been able to work with you and have some really great conversations. So I'm so excited to have you join this conversation today. And then I also have
Amanda.
Michelle. Thanks. Then I also have Michelle with C&R, also another very familiar face to anyone who's been in the industry for a while. And I have no doubt that the conversation that we'll get to have here today surrounding the state of the industry is going to be very valuable and give us some great tidbits moving forward into next year.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Amanda, for having us here. And I love how coordinated you are, by the way, with the flannel and the shirt all the way to the backdrop. That is impressive and some good branding.
Thank you. Yeah. Not intentional. It just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
This is a chicken or the egg moment, Amanda. I want to know which came first, the flannel or the Zoom background. That's what I want to know.
Oh, great question.
Right? Definitely the background, but we'll just say it was really planned.
Okay.
I assumed you bought the flannel because it was so on brand.
I mean, I did. But no.
Thank you.
Well, you guys, for those who might be joining us today who aren't familiar, I just gave your name and who you're here with. Could each of you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at your company, and what your company does?
Sure. Do you want me to take it first, Leighton? So,
I do.
Okay. All right. So I'm Michelle. I'm with C&R Magazine. I have had the opportunity to purchase the magazine from the RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, about 2.5 years ago now. I actually came into the industry in 2015 and worked at a different publication in the industry. So I have been in restoration since then. Prior to that, I was more in TV and print news. And, before coming into the industry, like many people, I'd never heard of the restoration industry, but I'd been to a lot of house fires, a lot of localized flooding events, a lot of those things. And I had no idea what happened after the news crews pulled out. After, day one, the disaster happens. The news crews rarely check up on what happens after the disaster happens. And I love now being on the flip side and seeing how things are put back together. I love working with restorers and being part of the industry. It's amazing. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Awesome. Wow. What an interesting background to really be able to see both sides of what's happening.
Yeah, it brought a unique background. And before getting into the industry, I had a desk job where I was sitting behind a desk all day and not getting to interact with people. And I found that very almost like soul draining. I really missed the relationships that I got to have with people in prior careers. And here I am. The relationships here, I don't think can be beat.
It's very true. Very true. Leighton.
Amanda, my name's Leighton. So I'm the CEO at Knowhow. And what most people know Knowhow as is Knowhow is an app on a technician's phone that onboarded them to the company. It helped them to get up to speed. It's a tool that it makes it very easy for their managers to be able to equip them to solve problems independently. And then it's a tool that connects them with a digital mentor we call Howie, kind of our version of Siri for restoration companies. And I think a better way to understand Knowhow, though, is what are the problems that we solve? So what are the largest challenges? The largest challenge that restorers have in North America is how do we attract? Sorry, speaking of technology, my technology thinks it needs my help right now. But we solve the problem that keeps restorers up at night, which is how do I get a new person up to speed very quickly? How do I unlock capacity in my managers to be able to manage more team members when it's so difficult to find good quality managers? And then ultimately, for companies that recognize that this is a high stakes industry where we often need, like getting things done is a coordinated effort, not just a coordinated effort of people, but a coordinated effort of software tools, of equipment, of conversations, of meetings, and how do you stitch that whole process together, and how do you then deliver it through a increasingly younger and younger workforce who are increasingly less and less familiar with how to do things in kind of a trades-based environment.
Sure.
And then you layer on top of that the fact that that the fastest growing demographic in this industry are people that didn't grow up speaking English. And so
Right.
then how do you do that through the language barrier? And so at a high level, Knowhow is very focused on helping those companies deliver on the promises that they make through confident workforce. But at a more granular level, we are a software provider, and I think we're pioneering a lot of the applications of AI into this industry that people are quite excited about.
Absolutely. Very, very cool. Michelle, I know you had mentioned your background, and specifically now that you are at C&R. Leighton just spoke a little bit to just the benefit that Knowhow has in this industry specifically, which I think is really such a huge corner on the market of something that this industry needed, but also can grow with them for the generations that are so focused on tech and coming into this, but also just, non-native English speakers and the ability to adapt for those needs as well. Michelle, could you speak a little bit to what the benefit of C&R Magazine is to our industry, and what does that provide?
Sure. And yeah, I'll give a little nod back to Leighton really quick, because I know we're going to dive into state of the industry. But one of the things that we found this year is restorers are starting to get kind of technology fatigue in trying to adopt so many different, see through the weeds. There's so many different options. How do I know what's right for me? And so to have something like Knowhow that can help bring it all together, I think is a tremendous value to the industry. And so yes, nod to Leighton and his team. So C&R is the oldest and biggest publication in the industry. We reach about 15,000 contractors across the US and into Canada, and some actually in Australia and a few other scattered places. We do everything from having educational webinars, like Leighton and I are working our way through a 3-part series on state of the industry, and those have been really well attended. We have webinars on everything from technology to state of the industry to those kind of things. We have our bi-monthly publication that you can get in print or digital. We have another, it's called C&R in Focus, which is an e-magazine that's on specific topics every other month. So next year we'll be covering things like technology and leadership and soft skills and drawing, like very specific e-magazines on one specific topic, and restorers can read those, pass a quiz, and get IIC or CCECs. So that's one of the big popular things that we found. Restorers are actually taking those and circulating them across their entire team, because it's a different way for people to get those CECs that they need so badly and to interact with some of the top contributors and minds in the industry who are creating the articles that are in there. I have my own podcast. That's another thing. So it's just an all-encompassing media brand. I have an amazing team behind me at C&R that makes it all possible and makes it all happen. And the more that we can do to connect and educate the industry, the better.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I am so excited to dive into the state of the industry and just talk through, some of the things that you've really already hinted at that this year brought forth and brought to light. How many years has the state of the industry been being published?
This is the second year. So we just started last year. So this is just year 2.
That's what I thought. And one of the things that you highlighted at the beginning of the report was just the increase in the amount of responses that you guys got this year. So speak to that a little bit. How did you, get the information? How did you get people to respond? Why do you feel like you felt or saw such a higher level of involvement this year?
Leighton, you're up.
So I think there's a few angles there, but Amanda, I think the numbers, 42% increase in participation over last year.
Wow.
Why? I would say because I think of 3 parts. One is that I think people recognized the value of the report that was produced last year. C&R and Knowhow, we put literally our money where our mouth is, and we decided to to join arms and put together something that we thought that the industry was lacking, which was a seminal report, a report that helps people in this industry to be able to understand, where do I stand? Like, how do I stack up against the rest of the industry? And and really, what are the forces that are driving this industry? And am I going to get crushed by these waves, or am I actually in a position to ride these waves? And so I think the number one thing that drove it is, people saw last year's report and they recognized this is a very important resource for the industry. And I think that they rolled up their sleeves, so to speak, and dusted off their keyboards and said, I'll participate. And with that, the second part is that I think a lot of vendors and service providers also recognized how important this report is. And so then they really joined with us in helping their audiences to be able to be aware of this and to participate. And then, hey, let's not take away from the fact that Knowhow and C&R, our respective teams, were quite encouraged with the reaction. And so we just poured on more steam this last year. So I think those and other factors led to participation. And I anticipate that will continue to just compound in growth year over year. And I think that that will just continually add to, I think, the reliability and the authoritative nature of this document.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, I think Leighton hit it on the head. Knowhow's done so much research in the past that that's why I when I first had this idea that we needed some sort of, I had people ask me all the time for data on the industry and ask me where it existed or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, like some of the big contractors have paid to do kind of their own research and have something, but getting your hands on that probably isn't going to happen. And I knew that I couldn't do this by myself, but Knowhow has done so much research. This isn't their first rodeo. They have multiple books that they've done and other research within this industry and I think elsewhere. And so I'm thankful for the amount of work that their team has been able to put in, because I would have no idea how to analyze the data once we have it. I can come up with the questions and kind of figure out what it means after we've collected it all, but having them really spearhead honestly, like the hard work of it is fabulous. The team is phenomenal and has done a great job.
Wonderful. Leighton, you had kind of already hinted at this in the beginning, and even just in your last response of the sentiment of the report really allows companies to look at who they are and where they're at. And really, I think you had termed the wave of the industry. Am I going to be crushed by this or be able to ride this wave through to kind of that like next stage of my business, which is a huge advantage for companies to be able to have and not just hope that, they're going to hit the mark when the next big thing happens. Looking at the overall big picture of the report, kind of the nitty gritty, how have you seen this matter? Have you seen other companies like come out of the research that you've been able to produce and say, oh, we need to pivot and look differently at what we're doing to allow for a different level of success in the future?
So at a high level, I think a report like this is really important for an industry like the restoration industry because it's commoditized in nature, meaning that, really a lot of the services are similar. They're delivered with the same equipment. They're ideally delivered under the same standards. They're delivered with the same consumables, and largely, I mean, and again, I don't mean this as a slight, but you being in the marketing game, Amanda, a lot of it is delivered by companies with logos that even look similar, right?
Sure.
Like there's a lot of similarity.
Absolutely.
And so when you have high degrees of consistency, the ability to be able to understand, I would say, where there's opportunities to be able to differentiate, where there's opportunity, like when you have an industry that moves like a pack, you have to make sure you're part of the pack. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like there's some of it you need to be, how do I be part of the pack? But then also, how do we also stand out? How do we make sure that we are early adopters, so that we're on the leading edge, not on the trailing tail of the industry? And so if a report like this would not be relevant if it was like, 1820 and it was like a Wagons West journal on what to do on the open prairie, because
Sure.
it's all new. Like it's all new. So it's like what's the value of data when everything's new?
Right.
But when things are largely known, I think it's important that you understand where you stand. So I think, allegorically, there's examples where you'll go to conferences, and it's very common. I think Michelle and I would both point to examples where presentations delivered by vendors referencing content,
Yep.
references from consultants where the report becomes a part of how they meet and engage with their customers. I can think of several conversations I've had with, from TPAs to vendors to software providers, of how this conversation led to some internal conversations that actually influence their service or product offerings. I think that we can see, because the data, we're always kind of looking at new areas, but ultimately there's a foundation, there's a base of core content like compensation and tenure and all these different things, and we really wanted to maintain consistency in that question line, because the industry lacked comparable data to say, like, is this getting any better? And so I think that because we're also seeing improvements year over year, I think that it's I don't think it's really out of line to connect a few dots that the report is helping leaders and management teams to have a higher level of awareness of certain challenges, and then maybe being able to triage some of the fires in their business, and focusing on which fires probably hold the most opportunity for them, like relative to the larger organization. But let's not forget, the last thing I'll say, Amanda, let's not forget that this is a very busy, very intense industry, and so for the average company, really just a lot of it's just head down work. Like a lot of companies right now, they're just racing to just wrap up 23 strong. And so in a report like this, I think I like to say it's kind of like an up periscope moment, meaning like you can kind of stay submerged, focused on the year, but you can kind of send up a little periscope and see what else is going on in the industry around you, and then get back to work. So it doesn't this report doesn't require you to send a cohort of staff to an industry conference. Not to say that's not important. But I think that we can all agree, Michelle, good insight, timing of when the report comes out. I think it's kind of in a shoulder season where there's not a lot of insight offered in the industry, and so that was important. But tactically speaking, I can think of, all I have to do is look at my inbox for vendors who are asking to get the slides and get vector files because they plan to incorporate it into how they're planning to influence their offerings next year.
Yeah, I would kind of just quickly add to that I agree with everything Leighton has said, that there's kind of how people look at it from the contractor side and from the vendor side. So I think contractors largely view it as, I'm not alone now. They see this on paper and they're like, I am not alone. Hiring is hard. Getting paid is hard. I think there's interesting data that's come out of it. M&A has been such a huge trend that seems to be slowing down maybe a little bit. We'll see what happens. I think there's more shifts happening versus it actually slowing down. But, in that space, getting contractors seeing like, oh, maybe I don't need to worry so much about contractors being acquired in my market. Like maybe I can still maintain my market share even if I'm not acquired or I'm not selling, because I can see from the state of the industry that people in these markets who have chosen to stay independent have done okay. And then people on the flip side who have chosen to be acquired have also been okay. And so, kind of a little like reassurance on either side of the aisle. And then yes, on the vendor side, vendors are really leaning into this, which is exciting to see. And I think they're doing it in a way that they want to serve contractors as best they can. I mean, I've had multiple vendors already reaching out to me asking for the graphs and the charts and all of that so that they can start using it with their team. And I know like at Interconnect in January, CoreLogic's event, they're going to use a lot of the data as like laying the groundwork for the show and where the industry is going. And so I think that really, again, shows how valid the data is, how strong it is. So yeah, it's kind of coming at it from all sides. And gosh, if I love the idea that the vendors are leaning into it in hopes of trying to solve some of contractors' problems. Like now they're seeing it on paper and thinking, okay,
Yes.
how can we take this and help solve some of these problems for the contractors now that we for sure see that they are? It's harder to ignore when the problems are right in front of you.
Absolutely. I mean, I know we definitely had those conversations internally, even our team looking at the report and saying, okay, I mean, obviously we're a digital marketing company that aims to partner with those in the restoration business. Well, based on their problems, how is what we offer helping to solve that, to alleviate some of the things that the report brought to light that are the pain points that they're experiencing? So, I can definitely speak to the validity of what this information brings to someone as a vendor in this industry. It's very, very valuable. So, okay, let's take a step back. Absolutely, this report is so huge in what it offers and the insights that it gives to our industry. What are some of the top findings that came out of this year? And then of that, I guess maybe the second question is, was there anything to you that was really surprising, or was it kind of right on par with what you expected of the industry?
Leighton, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Well, let me maybe highlight some things that were surprising.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that I found surprising was not necessarily what happened, but what didn't happen. And so what I mean by that, so the report last year indicated there was strong sentiment towards, for example, decreasing the amount of third-party administrative work. There was strong indication that a lot of the industry wanted to just go just headlong into commercial work. There was a lot of focus that 2023 is going to be a heavy revenue growth year. And you know what? The data would indicate that really none of those things really happened. That I think that there were some market factors that made 23 more challenging than many anticipated, and so many actually largely maintained the amount of, we use the term the revenue mix, the mix of the revenue that was represented by third-party administrators. I'm also conscious of the fact that the TPAs have been investing heavily in improving their offerings, and so there's that. And on the commercial side, one of the things that we speak to is that this kind of bullish charge ahead into commercial didn't really happen, and I think because there are some headwinds that a lot of people encountered. Commercial is a very capital intensive, where you have to have a unique cash flow capacity, and the cost of capital became much more expensive. So those are some examples of some things. And then other things that were really surprising. I think one that comes to mind is just no question the headline was AI. And when you think about what trends are most front of mind for restorers, I guess I went into this report thinking that it would be inflation, and everything's getting more expensive around here. Well, hey, I mean, when you compare how AI dominated, in terms of top of mind themes as compared to inflation, I mean, it makes inflation look like a rounding error in the data. And so that was really quite interesting. I mean, as an AI provider, that's something we think about.
Absolutely.
Those are some things. There's some other things I thought were particularly interesting, but those come to mind for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like leaning into the AI nod, this time last year, people were kind of talking about it, but not a whole lot. So for it to go from kind of this in the distance, we're not really talking about it, it's not really a serious thing, to being the number one thing on people's minds is a huge jump. And the data showed that, almost 3/4 of the industry is either open to embracing it or is embracing it. So that is going to be an interesting avenue that we watch between now and the next report of how is the industry going to embrace AI, and what ways is this going to be positive. And I thought one of the kind of fun things that came out of this year's study was doing kind of like a Sports Center ranking of software.
I love that.
Job management and yes. And I thought that was a really fun outcome and kind of creating some maybe even more friendly competition amongst those players of where they're ranking and how they're doing and all of that. And so I think that is interesting to see some, maybe newer players that are making it into the job management lineup here of the top 7 or 8 in the industry, and then how the photo documentation people are weighing out, and then estimating platforms as well. Xactimate is far and ahead, but it'll be interesting to see in years to come, especially as carriers shift. Carriers are losing money now and having to tighten their belts, and that's trickling down to the TPAs and the adjusters and down to us. There's this big effect. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that shifts in the next year between now and the next report. I think Leighton pretty much covered the things that I thought were the most surprising. I was also surprised that there wasn't a TPA shift, but I feel like dialogue in the industry over the last year has been less negative toward the TPAs and more focused on, if we're going to do it, how do we do it the right way? And I've actually had more conversations ever in the last even 6 months of people who are actually more pro TPA and saying there is a space for these, and if you learn the right processes, it actually could be better in the long run for your company, which I hear both sides of that argument, so I'm not trying to get into that argument, because you could totally argue that either way, and I actually have tried to argue it either way, but I, like Leighton, was surprised that that there wasn't more of a shift there. I think people did expect more of a shift, and there wasn't. And I guess that the other area that was kind of more encouraging that came out of the report, that also, from talking to restorers, we could see this happening, is that finding labor has become a little bit easier. So I think that is, a good nod in the right direction. And now one of the beauties of now having a second year of this under our belt is now we have some correlating data to figure out what is bringing those people in and what are some good, wage ranges for the different levels of people that you're bringing in.
Sure. In relation to some of the data that you're collecting, obviously, some of the things like wages and hiring and even just trends obviously vary depending on what area of the country, a company is located in. And specifically, really, are they in a metro area? Are they in a rural area? Did you find in some of your numbers that there's a pretty wide range difference depending on the location of a company and maybe the specific problems a company might be experiencing related to their surroundings?
I can speak to that, Amanda. I would say no, for probably 2 reasons. One is no, in the sense that I think most of the themes and most of the subjects that we drill into, they're pretty universal. Like they have pretty wide-reaching impact. And I think that the other component of that is that I would think that that's not something where I would say we really from the outset, from the design, really said, how do we think about the variances between, say, more of a rural located restorer to more of a someone in some type of a large municipality. And I think it's probably because we look at the industry, maybe a little bit different categorically. So, for example, when you look at the percentage of restorers that would say that I'm based here, but I respond regionally to an entire region.
Sure.
The vast majority of restorers, the data actually indicates that, they might be based in, Albuquerque, or they might be based in, say, Savannah, but their footprint is much larger than just the municipality they're located in. So they might find that, from an operational sector, they might be in some, kind of feeder bedroom community because there's a cost savings. But by and large, the average footprint of a restorer is much, much larger than the municipality that they would, that you'd send mail to. So that's why we didn't look at it that way. The other thing is that we really look at this industry as segmented, and again, not trying to put everyone in their own boxes and stalls, but we see some of the difference is more around franchise versus independent. And then within independent, and there's variety in franchising. I spent a fair bit of time in franchising, but within independence, well, you have localized independence, you have national independence, you have independents that have really true coast to coast coverage, and so you kind of got to draw the line somewhere, and so that's kind of how I would respond. The differences between franchises and independents, there's a lot of parity, but there's also some some things that are quite, I would say, characteristically quite different. So I don't know if that adds more nuance than clarity, but that's how we approached it.
No, I love that. I think I like the perspective of, the problems that were addressed and that you looked at in the study are really universal to the industry, and recognizing, much of, I think, what we see with the clients that we work with too, while you might be located in a smaller municipality or a smaller area, their footprint is so much bigger than that area. And I think that goes to really kind of speak to the impact of that this industry can have. It's so much just beyond this like small visible reach. Even growing up in this industry and now working in it, it's very interesting to see how far the reach of the restoration industry goes. As such a small industry, what a big player it is in such, kind of these like major trauma moments of a homeowner's or a business owner's life. It's a small industry with a huge impact.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yeah, no question.
Okay, so anything else that you want to add just to the findings? Anything that surprised you or that you really want to highlight?
I would say really quickly, touching on Leighton's nod to the franchise versus independent data, this is the first year that we broke that apart so that you can see the difference in revenue or TPA work or commercial to residential, all of that. There's a lot of different breakdowns. We tried to go down to different, because we did realize the difference between those companies and that they do function differently. So, there's data in there for everyone now. So you're going to be able to see, if you're on the independent side, how you stack up to the franchise side. And, that uncovered some data that it makes good sense, that franchises tend to do more TPA work than the independent companies do, that the franchises tend to do more residential work as well, unless they're a specifically commercial franchise, of course. So those kind of things. So that's, I think, an interesting break apart that we were able to get into the data this year. And I know my team, and I think I can speak for Knowhow, we look forward to continuing to adapt the data and the report for many years to come, and continue to hone in on, like, we tossed out some questions this year. We brought in a few new questions. We segmented it out different this year. So, figuring out the best way to get this data to the industry and what questions we need to be asking in the future, what needs to be removed, and kind of staying up on what restorers want to know.
I think what I would add to that, Amanda, is that the report, for those that have had an opportunity to read it, know that, and for those who haven't, but for those who have had an opportunity to read it, it's not just a smattering of data and graphs and insight and, just kind of an opportunity for, navel gazing and thinking about, oh, that's an interesting stat. We really try to ground each section in action items and tangible things that we, as those that are really grinding through the data, would say, it would seem that people that take these actions will have an outsized advantage. Or, we also anticipate that there are some important kind of, subjective elements to the way the data has to be applied within your company. So each section ends with, we call them discussion questions for management teams. And so the report really hones in towards the end of the report on, so there's some predictions, specific to AI that I think are interesting. But then in addition to that, there are some kind of closing themes where we really try to push on the reader to consider these, and I'm happy to just provide a quick highlight to those themes, and then, we can drill in if you want. But But one is that anytime you see an industry that seems to be so hog wild about AI, those of us that are kind of on the side of trying to bring AI in as a vendor or as a service provider, most are familiar with this term garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
And really what that's indicative of is that so much of what AI is it makes predictions. It looks at information, and then based on that, it tries to provide suggestions or recommendations or you name it. And one of the things that we talk about in the report is this idea of fool's gold, this idea that many people believe that they are well positioned to take advantage of, say, the AI opportunity. But AI is think of it as like, this idea that we've got this shower that's going to be so popular, but if it's plumbed into kind of a muddy water, it's really not going to be a very popular or effective resource. And so we're all excited about it. So what we encourage people to consider is, how do you use 2024 to bring two things that are very important into your company culture. One is adapting your company culture to be able to effectively take advantage of the AI opportunity. And what that is that's beginning to really push your team to develop a greater administrative rigor around how they capture and document and how they create uniform entry practices. All of those kind of sloppy, inconsistent, depends on the crew, didn't have time to properly onboard them. All of that is really going to create an outsized delta between companies that have been able to maintain this operational administrative rigor and those that have really been sloppy and said, well, you know what, when we need it, we'll bring the rigor. But so much of the opportunity that AI provides is the ability to leverage historical data sets, historical archive. And then so for those that have been very rigorous and, have had a lot of grief from their teams being like, why are you so detailed about this? Well, they're going to really, I would say, have an outsized advantage. And then the second to that is, when you look at the data, it would seem to us that 2024 is really a year around unlocking operational efficiencies within your company. And we're very passionate about that at Knowhow. We've kind of replaced the SOP binder. If you're still using an SOP binder, Knowhow's we kind of like RIP, rest in peace operational binder, like Knowhow's kind of replaced that. And so we really believe that 2024 is a year to unlock operational efficiencies, to get beyond this idea, because so many companies are going to find themselves fighting. It was a two-front war, meaning we have our operations, plus we have to figure out how to keep populating our workforce. Now you're going to have a three-front war. Three-front wars are very complicated, meaning the way we do business is very chaotic. We struggle to be able to onboard new people efficiently. Oh, and by the way, we're left behind because we haven't had an administrative rigor to really take advantage of all of the AI opportunities. And so I would say, 2024 is a great year to just finally put to bed operational disorder. Finally put to bed this idea that, Gen Zs, millennials, they're, like they're this or that, and just say, hey, that's the workforce.
Right.
Remember, like millennials are 25 to like, 41, 42. So, I mean, these are the people managing our companies right now. These aren't whippersnappers, right? And so I think that 2024 is a great opportunity to make cultural investments, not just, let's have pizza parties, but cultural investments in rigor that will help your team adapt to technology, adapt to AI, and finally make next year the year that we get our operational, playbook in place.
I love that. The idea of putting to bed operational disorder. I think every company has been there at some point. And if we say we haven't, well, that's probably not truthful. At some point in the growth stage, you've been at the point where you go, oh, okay, we've got to go back and fix this piece. So I love that is a takeaway that you brought to light, Leighton. That really brings my next question. And Leighton, you can certainly expand upon this, but what are some of the other takeaways then that companies can take this report and look at for 24 2024 and make sure that we have topics and things that are a part of discussions and planning and decision making into next year.
So each section, you know what, Michelle, I was blabbing on. You're
fine. Because I don't really have anything to add. All I was going to say is I hope that this report helps bring restorers together. For example, on the issue of getting paid, the RIA has been doing a lot of work toward helping level that playing field between restorers and the carriers and the TPAs, and trying to help with the pushback that we get from adjusters sometimes and all of that. And so I hope that restorers use this as a nod to let's continue to work together to overcome some of these challenges. The carriers are getting pinched too. So it's gonna take some work between the industries to get it there. And, this is also a great resource to look at, like, are you struggling with photo documentation? Well, what are your peers saying about that? Where are they going? Those are kind of the keys to that. Part of the key to the getting paid equation is the kind of software that you're using. And then again, the systems and processes that Leighton was talking about. Organizational efficiency is going to be huge to remain competitive as AI is taking over and technology is ramping up more and more. And our industry is typically a little behind the 8 ball on technology. So let's use this as an opportunity to move forward and work together to move the bar on getting paid. Everybody wants to get paid. It's not going to hurt you if you and your competitor both start getting paid sooner.
Right.
My comment there, Amanda, is, each section kind of has, let's call it relevant action items per section. So I think, a publication we had out in September, it's a book called Winning with Workers. It's based on 8 principles. And in that we say, hey, some of these principles are probably at work within your organization. Some of them may not be. So similarly, these sections, I think some sections, will have more applicability to some of your listeners. Sure. And so I think that, it's probably, I think an encouragement would be get your hands on the report. It's not going to cost you anything. Make sure that you're signed up for C&R because they just have this buffet of related resources and, that dig in. And so I think that's so important that you're plugged into, this shouldn't just be a blip on your radar of insight and in the industry. This should really be just part of a rhythm that you've established with groups like C&R. But if we were to talk very practically, the interplay between changes is really interesting to me, meaning that when you make a change here, it's going to have a positive impact over here. And, no different than someone who pulls on a thread and then it rings a bell behind them or whatnot. It's similar. So, for example, companies that have failed to properly standardize the way they do things. One of the reasons why they often say we failed to standardize them. Most of the reason they would say, well, because we're busy, or because Hank's been doing it this way and Sheila's been doing it this way, and what the heck. And what we would say to that, as a company that standardizes hundreds of restoration companies, is that the amount of horsepower and the amount of, let's call it like pound for pound horsepower, that you're going to get out of applying creativity and unique approach to the aspects of this industry that are largely commoditized, meaning how to respond to a Category 2 water loss. The creativity has to be applied to how do we create an employment experience that is attractive and distinct and it's sticky. That's where you have to apply creativity. How do we figure out what the heck is going on with all of this AI stuff and how do we incorporate it in? And that's where you have to apply creativity. And there's so much effort just being put into, every job we're kind of like just figuring it out, again and again and again. And so many questions are answered over and over and over again that are really should just be locked up, standardized, and put in your workers' hands. And so, but one of the things that is clearly a hot topic for people today in this industry is how much do you pay a technician? And is there a correlation between that and tenure? And so a lot of people, I think they kind of bristle at that conversation because they're already not making maybe the margins that they'd like, or their take home isn't what they thought it could be. You see all
Sure.
their buddies getting bought by, big company X, big company Y. And it's easy to fall into this position where you say, well, insurance carriers, everyone is making it difficult for me to make a buck.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have to be able to create internal operational efficiencies. That's why you need your claims to get, processed faster by improving, the integrity of your data. That's why you need to be able to have a rigorous way of onboarding your staff.
Mm-hmm.
So I could just kind of summarize that in investing in your operational, like just operational tightness is going to not only have an outward impact on so many benefits in your company, but it's also going to, just like raising the sail, waiting for when the right opportunity comes along, it's going to allow you to be well positioned for all of the changes coming to this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other component that I would say is, it's going to give when you have operational efficiencies, processes, systems, best practices around data collection, things like that. It's also going to free up your subject matter experts and your management team to be able to actually have just the bandwidth, just to have a couple extra hours a day to be able to attend that C&R webinar, to be able to make it to a conference and not just get crushed the week you get back. But that operational rigor is going to be critical for your people just to have. I think one of the biggest resistance to growth and innovation in this industry is just this whole concept. I think it comes from kind of this Protestant work ethic that is so, characteristic of North America, but idle hands, don't let me catch you doing nothing there, manager.
Right.
And the reality is that this industry actually needs managers and leaders to kind of have some idle hand moments where they can go back and reflect on their notes from that conference or that webinar, or take advantage of that, that offering where maybe their software provider is introducing some new functionality and they need to really dig into it and understand it.
Sure.
And so creating margin for yourself through operational efficiency is key to just creating bandwidth to have the airspace to be able to explore what's next. And the beauty of it is when you unlock those efficiencies, from a goal of being competitive, I think you have a higher willingness to reinvest those efficiencies into higher wages for technicians without it, cutting into a margin that you become accustomed to.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Great insight. Okay. Just one final question before we end our time, because I would be going against everything in me if I didn't ask this question. How do you think the findings of this year's report lean towards the importance of marketing for restoration moving into 2024?
Okay, so I will take that one. So, or at least start. So, for one, I think now that we have the breakout between the independent and franchises, I think people can look and see how they stack up against other people in their market. Although, a ServPro is going to compete against an independent in their market, so they compete against each other. But,
Sure.
I think that this will ideally help restorers lean into, hey, we really want to grow our commercial work, but it looks like everybody else does too. So how are we going to make ourselves how are we going to differentiate ourselves from everybody else who has the same goals as us? I think that that's one of the big takeaways is a lot of the industry has a lot of the same goals. And on the flip side, look at the opportunity that could lie in, I said this a lot after last year's report, look at the opportunity that could lie within the residential space. If so many people are trying to move into commercial, what's going to happen to all those residential claims that restorers now are like, I want to just go for the big commercial stuff? Well, there's way more residential claims in a year than there are commercial. So is there some opportunity for you there? And how can you, again, marketing, so much of it comes down to differentiation, right? How do you make yourself look different? And how are you truly different from your competition in your marketplace? So I would say this data is something that you can leverage and know where you stack up against your competition in your marketplace and use that to your advantage to figure out what some of your differentiators are.
I love that.
In my thoughts on that, I think what Michelle said, that's the soundbite right there. It's so important. the number one, we've been saying this for a while, is that we believe that this is an industry that is much less opportunity restrained than people restrained. It's much more people restrained, and so in that marketing discussion, is recruitment HR's problem, or is recruitment actually marketing's problem as well? And I think that there's a very important thing to consider is how do we just consider the fact, and I can speak with this as some authority, Amanda. We've done, one of our first studies was on negative online reviews, and we expanded it to a study of 10,000 online reviews for restoration providers. And next week I've got like a special date for my wife, and I did some digital window shopping, right? I mean, can you even think about, like, I would think it'd be like suicide, like it'd be like relational suicide not to like look at the photos, and look what the ambiance is, you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
I mean, nowadays you go for dinner, you go to a place and it's not cool, and you just know, like,
it's not cool.
Spouse is like, did you even look at the photos? Right? And
did you look at the Google reviews?
Did you look at the reviews? And I think a lot of workers, a week in, 2 weeks in, like, we've done the studies, Amanda, like, why do good people quit from restoration companies? And sometimes it's like, hey, it was just not as advertised. And you know what? There's a lot of conversations that happen 2 to 3 weeks after the hire, sitting around, having a pop, having a brew with their friends. And you know what their friends are saying? Didn't you look at the online? Didn't you look at their photos? Like, didn't you read their reviews? Like, are you a modern human? And
are you a modern human?
I think that staff look at your online presence because they want to know, like people, call it vanity. Like, people care about, who they tie their identity to nowadays, and who they entrust with their personal brand, and you know what I'm saying? And so some people, absolutely, they just need a job. But a lot of people nowadays, they come to the job with this idea that, hey, like, do I want to be associated with this? And so that's what I would say about marketing. I think you have to factor that in. I think it's a variable that is complex, but I think it's necessary. And then really on the marketing side, I think that something that is I think is really interesting when it comes to this industry, is this is an industry that they have so many good stories to tell, and I think this is an industry that I think I'm surprised that there aren't more storytellers.
I agree. Yes.
So I'm surprised by that, and if I gave you a bonus one, I don't know, I would just like find a way to clone Sean Folks from Guarantee Restoration, and just like a leader who's willing to be goofy and engage, and just to me, what it tells me is, like, if I was applying to that company, I'm like, you know what, the guy at the top is human and he's relatable, and so, anyways, I just think there's some real champions out there, and from a marketing perspective, I think that what Guarantee's doing there is just super smart, and it's not only smart, it's authentic. Like, it's
absolutely
the best part about it is that's really who he is. He's like really just like a really cool dude.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so important too, because often marketing can get lumped into, the conversations that I get to have every day are marketing related to lead generation or marketing related to SEO, but it truly is so much more than that. Just like a restoration company's reach extends so far beyond just the location of their office, as does the reach of marketing into recruitment, into operational efficiencies. I mean, it's so much more than just, okay, how are we reaching our prospective customers, right? It's an internal aspect too. How are we reaching our team? How are we relating to people? Who are we? What is our brand? I love that. And I'm fully on board with the share your story idea. We need to just create an idea of like, tell me what happened. I don't know. Maybe we need our own hashtag or, good idea for some interaction at our future booth, I guess, at future conferences, maybe.
I'm working on like a gossip column for C&R. So stay tuned. That's hopefully coming in 2024, like a little back of the magazine, like Restoration Horror Stories Anonymous.
I'll read it. I promise. That sounds awesome.
Everybody's going to go to the back of the magazine now. People are going to be like, I don't care about all this. Let's just go read the gossip.
They'll flip back to the other stuff. They just got to read the funny stories first, too.
That's right. That's right.
Well, it has been fantastic just chatting with both of you today. I'm so appreciative for the open dialogue. I loved the opportunity to sit and read the report, when it first came out a couple weeks ago. And I know personally that it will be one of the things that I continue to reference. Although I have to say, I got a hard copy of the first one. And now I'm like, even as a digital marketing company, I very much prefer hard copies. So maybe I'll shoot one of you an email. So who wants to give me a hard copy of this?
We're working on it.
Just so I can highlight all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that either of you would want to share before we just end this time?
I don't have anything else. Thank you, Amanda, for having us here very much. This was a very fun conversation, and I appreciate you. So thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to chatting with both of you again soon. And again, for those of you who haven't had the chance, go check out the State of the Industry report by Knowhow and C&R. Such valuable information. And I know that you will not be disappointed in the ways that you can apply it to your business and moving into 2024. So thank you again, both of you. Looking forward to chatting again soon.